Hey everyone, welcome back to Make It Happen Mondays, where we talk about sales, business, entrepreneurship, personal growth, mental health, and everything in between with guests who I truly respect and I think make a positive impact on the world around us. And today's guest is Collin Mitchell. Now, Collin is a 4-time founder with 3 exits and is currently the VP of Sales at Leadium, where they help B2B companies with their top-of-funnel challenges, so right up my alley. He lives in the San Francisco Bay Area with his wife and 4 kids, and also hosts one of the top sales podcasts, Sales Transformation, that you should definitely check out. And this was an easy conversation because we were definitely speaking the same language. Both of us are kind of specialized on top of funnel stuff. And we talked about, first of all, his origin story, which I thought was fantastic, and how he grew up with a single mom and didn't go to school, and education in sales really wasn't an option, but it gave him a path. And so we got really tactical on this one, talking about cold texting, how LinkedIn's basically been ruined by some of these AI bots, the role of the SDR moving forward, especially as it relates to AI, and how we're moving back to full cycle sales. And really reinforce the importance of personal brand and even starting your own podcast to help stand out. So take a listen to this one because it's filled with super tactical ideas and techniques and really things I think we should be thinking about as we evolve forward. Let's make it happen. Collin Mitchell, welcome to the Make It Happen Monday podcast, my friend. How you doing?
What's up, my man? Thanks so much for having me on. Doing good.
Yeah, this is gonna be a straight, 2 people talking about a profession and a role that we are both neck deep in, and also seeing some challenges with as far as outbound sales. But before we get there to the audience, why don't you give the audience a little background here, Collin, on where you're coming from? Specifically, like I always say, I'm moving more and more to the origin story, right? Like, so growing up, like parents, all that shit, where you grow up, small town, big town, those type of things. So see that journey, and then we'll dive into the topic. And also obviously tell them what you're doing these days so that we can put some context around it.
Perfect, yeah. So I was raised by a single mom. My mom raised 4 boys, me being the eldest. And
wow, single mom, 4 boys. Are you shitting me?
Yeah.
God bless her, man.
Now, different dads. So 3 of my brothers have different dads than myself, but she pretty much raised the 4 of us on her own for the most part. Did the best she could to pay the rent, keep food on the table. But we struggled. I mean, we were dirt poor, like in a way that most people probably don't understand. Like we lived out of motels, like we had food stamps to pay for groceries, and I remember like being in middle school, being super embarrassed in the grocery store, like hoping that we wouldn't see any friends, and so I had to get creative and, find things to do as a young kid if I wanted, new basketball shoes and stuff like that. And that was just kind of, how, I grew up, and, wasn't great in school and didn't really have anybody telling me that school was important. Didn't have a lot of positive like male role models in my life or anything like that. So, as soon as I got out of high school, like that was it for me. And I just got a job. Didn't really, have any aspirations of what I want to do. I just knew that I didn't want to be poor. Like that was it. I didn't know what I want to do. Just didn't want to be broke. Didn't want to live check to check. Didn't want to struggle like I had my, entire life. Yeah. And so my first job was like lugging around furniture, and, it was, I knew that, that wasn't going to take me far. So, eventually I got my first sales job, and, I had to sort of beg for the opportunity because I wasn't the like most responsible, young adult. So when I got that chance, I knew that it was like literally my way out. It was like, I didn't have a bunch of opportunities. So when I got that first sales job, I was first one into the office every single day. I didn't go out and party. I was the last one to leave every single day. And I came in every Saturday and or Sunday to get my lists ready for the following week and send out the proposals, and worked my way up as a top, full cycle AE pretty quickly. Was making, over, 120,000 a year, which was like, for me, I felt like, man, I was gonna, be living the dream, which, 120,000 now is like nothing, but
still coming from your background, man, that's huge.
Yeah. So, didn't really know what was next. I was like, hey, seems like the next logical step is to get into sales leadership. And my manager kept telling me that I was going to get a team. And frankly, I wasn't really ready for that, but they didn't have the guts to tell me that. So they just kept telling me what I wanted to hear. And so eventually I left there, got a leadership position at another company, worked there for a few years, and then ended up starting my first company with my wife. and we grew that to 5 million in 26 months.
Nice.
And from there, started multiple companies, had 3 exits, and then currently I'm the managing partner at Leadium.
Love it, man. I love that, because that is that's kind of really, for me, sales, I always say, is, I think the greatest profession in the world when done right and the worst when done wrong. And, the college and universities these days, I think, is such a scam at this point. You know what I mean? To go in 3, 4, 5, and don't get me wrong, quite frankly, if you pick a lane, like if you're that kid when you're in high school and you're like, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be whatever that thing is, then absolutely, I think it's worth it. But if you're like the other 90% of people, including myself, that had no fucking idea what they wanted to do coming out of high school, sales is such an avenue. Like, one of the things I've been wanting to do is write a book called This Is Sales, for exactly your situation. Like, when you get out of high school, and instead of just going the path that everybody else goes with universities, like, wait a minute, like, maybe try this profession out for a little bit, for a year or so, go make some money, and then go decide what you want to go do, right? And choose the education that you want. So I love that origin story, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, I know it's interesting because I have 4 kids now, right?
Yeah.
And there's part of me that's like, I want them to go to college and kind of get that opportunity that I never had. But then there's also this side of me that's like, but, is it worth it? And
right.
Me and my wife are saving money every month for all 4 kids to go to college, which, who knows what college is going to be when my kids are going to college. But it's kind of that begrudgingly, it's like, well, maybe 1 or 2 of them don't go, and maybe one, decides they want to be a doctor, and whatever the case is. But I think ultimately, like, selling is such a valuable skill for every human being, regardless of what they do. And I think instead of going to get a job as a young kid, at the burger place or washing cars or whatever kids typically do these days, getting some sort of just internship where you're on the phone or selling or something like that. You just learn some valuable skills that will serve you well in whatever you do.
Yeah, and I think that's why every kid that does go to college, I'm like, do me a favor, just get a business minor. At a bare minimum, get a business minor. It's like, you want to be an artist, fine, be an artist. Learn how to make money doing it, please, right? And ideally, go to a school that now has like a degree in sales. I think there's about 200 universities now where you can actually get your degree in sales. And I'm seeing some stuff, man. Like, I'm going down to Bryant University because they have this incredible sales school down there. And I sit in on some of these mock interviews and stuff like that with these kids who are like 16, 17, 8 years. I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, I'd like, this kid is better than 90% of the sales professionals I've come across in my career here, because they're actually teaching them the true fundamentals and teaching it as an actual profession, as opposed to the default profession that it's always been, which is really encouraging to me.
And the interesting thing is like, it's about time, right? Because I mean,
shit.
The amount of money that people pay to go to school to be a lawyer or a doctor, and how many salespeople make more than lawyers and doctors.
That's like, I never get into like how much money I make and those. I never obviously bring that up in conversations with random people, but like, there's been a few times where like a doctor or a lawyer has been like all holier than thou about them, how smart they are and how they went to Harvard Law and all this other stuff, and basically try, and obviously being condescending towards me and my profession. And I'll just be like, hey, just quick question, what'd you W-2 last year? With your glorious degree. And inevitably it's less, right? And I'm like, well, for my piece of shit University of Maryland degree that I didn't have to go into debt for, I'm actually making twice as much as you are. So thanks for your standing up on your little high horse here, you little asshole. But just realize that you don't act like you're not as important as you think you are. Yeah. So let's give these kids talk about a little bit about Leadium right now, because I want to transition this, because I think it's a great transition to a profession in sales, which is, a lot of them start in that SDR, BDR role, that outbound sales role. So talk a little bit about Leadium right now, and then let's transition to what's happening in this industry and and with all the stuff that you're seeing right now and where it's transitioning to.
Yeah. So Leadium, has been doing outbound for almost 10 years. Kevin and Sergey, the co-founders, I've known them super well. I actually used to be a Leadium customer. So Cool. They helped me scale 2 businesses to exit. And, most of the work that we do is in B2B tech and SaaS, but obviously pretty much B2B in general is everything that we do. Everything from, sort of outbound as a service to even inbound lead management, right? Inbound lead management has become something that's more and more popular for us as lots of companies are getting tons of inbound and they're not, managing that speed to lead properly, not qualifying or having, high paid salespeople spend a lot of time with unqualified leads. So we sort of solve that for them. And in general, that's what we do. But as far as like what's changed, like a lot has changed, as I'm sure you're seeing it, look, 3-4 years ago, you could do email only campaigns and never pick up the phone and easily book 20 meetings a month for a campaign. But today that's just not happening. Email is increasingly more difficult than it's ever been. That's, I think, the kind of dirty little secret that nobody wants to talk about, especially outbound agencies. Like they don't want to say that. But the reality is like email just takes a lot of time to get it to work right. Still possible, but there's a lot of things that we didn't. Number one is everybody has more email than they want to. So there's way more competition in the inbox. And then the second part is like the barrier to entry of like a sales engagement platform is so much lower, right? It used to be, Outrage, Sales Loft, $100 plus per user, 12-month contract, minimum seat count. But now, for $40, you can get a software that can send thousands of emails. And so that's part of the problem. And, spam filters getting tighter. So that's also a challenge. So you have to like scale email over time. So that's how email in general has changed. Where we see a lot of success is by leveraging the phone and doing it well. And there's a lot that goes into doing the phone well, right? The old when I first started in cold calling, it was like, hey, you had just one script and a list of names and you smile and dial.
Don't work.
and to some extent that kind of works, but not as much anymore. Like if you pick up the phone and, somebody feels that you don't know anything about them or their business, they're going to hang up on you so fast. So, a good sound phone strategy starts with the data. Like you got to have good data. And I think where a lot of people fall short is trying to rely on a single source for their data. And we could get into the who's better between ZoomInfo and Apollo and Lucia and you name it, but they all are good and strong in certain areas and not in others. And the solution is leveraging all of them to have better coverage.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that, it's the answer I don't have for, when I do a lot of training for these reps and stuff like that, and they'll ask and early they'll say, hey, what about, connect rates? Like, how can you help us with connect rates? I'm like, there's nothing I can do about that. You just got to get better lists. But there's also something about taking the mentality of those lists and then using the smile and dial approach, but to clean up the list than it is to actually get meetings. And if you trip over a meeting, then fantastic. Like one of the things I always used to do with my team was we'd call them database cleanup days. And so I'd rip a list of every account in our database that fit our profile, and then I'd export it. And I didn't even matter what territory the rep was in. I would just give them a list of names, and I would say, look, I need you to go in and start calling these and look for, like, did a automated teller pick up, or was it a live person? Did you get through to a voicemail that a person talked, said, hi, this is John Barrows, thanks for calling me, or did you just get to this is 1503, 5 up, that type of thing. So as we gathered that information, it was able to allow us to get tighter and tighter and tighter on the accounts that were most likely to buy, but also most likely to pick up too, right? So it was like we would take that step back, for instance, to clean up the database using manual dials and everything else, and maybe calling into, working with gatekeepers to gather that information so that next week's call blitz could be that much more effective. So besides, like, what are some of the things that you're doing right now to clean up the data, to really ensure outside of, because, when you talk about those disparate data sources, you're talking about adding more and more cost to the equation here with ZoomInfo plus this, plus this, plus this, plus this. So how do you, coach companies or yourself on how to not break the bank on the contact information, but make it so that every dial is getting better and better as you move forward? And forget about the scripts for a second. We'll talk about that, but it's that connect rate because I hear you, right? Phone is the best way. I still believe phone's the best way, as long as you have something to say and you got a target, because now if you pick up, that's my quickest chance to qualify and get you in. But most people right now, most reps are just throwing their hands up saying, I made 100 dials today. I got literally 0 connects. So why the should I make phone calls at this point? And I'm curious on your answer to that, but I'm also curious how you get better contact information so that those phone calls are worth it.
Yeah. So couple of things. We use multiple data sources, but we also only call direct dials and mobiles. So we don't call phone trees great keepers. And depending on who your ICP is, like maybe you can do that, maybe you can't. Like, if you're calling into, say, medical offices or something, kind of hard. Doctors are busy. They don't pick up their cell phones very often. Right. So you may have to deal with receptionist, office manager, gatekeeper, and so on. Beautiful. So obviously, to put it into context, highly depends on who you're calling on. And that also is going to depend on what data provider is best for you, right? Certain data providers are stronger, in certain areas and so on. So the other thing is we only call direct dials and mobiles, at least for the first, couple of passes on the list. And the other thing is we're using a parallel dialer as well. So we personally use Nooks. There's other options like Orem and many other ones that have come out. Doesn't matter, but you're simultaneously calling 5 people at once. So if you have good data and you have good technology, then you should have a better connect rate. And so what we see is on average, depending on who the ICP is, and this is across, the many companies that we work with, for every 8 to 14 dials, we're having a conversation with somebody.
Wow. That's pretty high connect rate right there. Because that's rare. And when you say conversation, that's not with a gatekeeper. That's with somebody of substance, right? Other than a gatekeeper.
That is talking to the person that we intended to call through direct dials and mobiles.
Nice. How do you deal with the mobile side of the house? Like, I get this question a lot. Like, what, because a lot of people get pissed off when they pick up their mobile, and I think this is a little bit of a generational thing too, and a demographic thing, but. When somebody does like, how'd you get this number type of stuff, or what do you do you have a specific approach to cell phones versus other stuff so that you preemptively address the potential intrusion that they might think it is?
Yeah. I would say that happens, but it doesn't happen as often as you would think. But you get the occasional really pissy person that's just like, how the heck did you get this number? Why are you calling me here? And, we usually just take the approach of like, hey, John, hey, totally sorry about that. But is there a better number that you'd prefer we reach you at? And then they're usually just like, oh no, like, what is this? What are you calling for? And it can be a little bit challenging because they're already very aggressive and they're already in that like defensive, like friction zone, which is the worst place to be in a cold call. Right. Yeah. And so sometimes what I think a lot of people are tempted to do is pitch. Right. Yep. And so it's best to just take a step back and say, hey, John, totally sorry. This is just the number I was provided. Is there a better number I could reach you at? And usually they'll kind of back off, or they'll be like, don't ever call this number again. Or sometimes they might say, yeah, here's my, office number, and they'll give you that. So I think that's really the only way you can approach it. What you don't want to do is like force the conversation to happen when they're in that zone of friction. Which can happen with anything. This is just one example of them being in a zone of friction.
Totally agree. I think that's the harder they pitch, the harder the resistance, right? So it's the more empathetic you are with what you're doing, and that's why I always talk about like the preemptive strike, where if you're calling them on a cell phone, almost call it out, sometimes, or at least practice different approaches to say, hey, I know you weren't expecting my call. I'll be real brief here, or something like that. Just kind of respect the fact that what you're doing. Are you all using text messages, right? Like cold text, just out of curiosity?
No, we don't use cold text. There's just too many regulations and stuff like that where it can get a little dicey. I know some people do it. I know, obviously I get cold texts all the time. I don't see it work very effectively in a B2B sense. B2C, obviously it works, or we wouldn't be getting all those texts all the time.
Yeah, no shit, right?
But no, we haven't used text at all.
The only way I would say using text would be kind of similar to the way I use voicemails now, where like I'll leave a voicemail, and a lot of times that voicemail is to point you in a different direction, right? It's like, hey, I just sent you this email, I sent you this in-mail, whatever it is, take a look at it, let me know. It's the same thing with text. Whereas if I'm having a hard time getting in touch with somebody, and I do have their cell phone number, I'll maybe send them an email and then right afterwards text them, be like, hey, Collin, sorry to bother you on your cell phone. I've been trying to get in touch with you. Haven't had luck. Not sure if my stuff's getting caught in spam. If you could go just check to see if it's in there and just let me know if you're interested. I'd appreciate it. I won't text you on this line again. Something like that. So it's like, basically, don't even respond to me. I just wanted to see if you could go take a look at it. And that's where I haven't gotten too much like F you, take me off your list type of stuff. But I don't think that we're going to, I don't know if we're going to be in the text world of cold texting for B2B at all. Do you think even with the generations coming up that it might get to a point where that is a preferred form of communication regardless of cold?
I mean, I think it could be, right? Because if email continues to get worse as it is, LinkedIn has been ruined by people, right? Like LinkedIn as a platform to build relationships and getting conversations started in a business context has become more difficult because people expect you to connect and pitch them now. Because that's just what they're used to, right? So much that now LinkedIn has got the ability where they've got the other inbox and marking people as spam in the inbox, and right, so it's gotten out of control. So, and if everybody starts to lean into phone and cold calling, because it's like, man, this is the only channel that, and I have always been a fan of phone over any other channel, to be honest, because if somebody doesn't reply to your email, they don't reply to your email. It doesn't tell you a lot, but if you at least get in a conversation with somebody, you can get some real-time feedback. But also with, younger generation of folks coming up and being buyers, that's their preferred way to communicate, and I'm a big fan of text, beyond like cold, but once you're in the sales process, text is very effective, right? I've closed many deals like over text and communicating on text, and especially because, emails just tend to get sometimes a little bit lost in the inbox. It can be very effective, but I could see that happening.
So where do you see things? So now we, add into this mess of declining response rates. And also you mentioned, LinkedIn's been ruined. It's getting even worse because, and I don't know if you saw the post, I did it last week, but it's not just in-mails anymore. Like AI is coming over and automating the comments now. And I had posted something on this, it was a LMS, review site or something like that.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, cool. And immediately like 5 or 6 posts came on board of people I had never seen before. And they all kind of follow the exact same format. They didn't say the exact same thing, but they all follow the exact same format. So I was like, son of a bitch. So I then took that, screenshot it, blocked out people's names, and then said, hey, if you're using automated LinkedIn to comment, then you stop it. Like I said you're a joke, and then I had changed it because I didn't want to offend too many people. But I was like, this is ridiculous, because if the whole point of LinkedIn is to generate relationships, is to make that impression point to show that somebody, and it's not to hard pitch, right? And so cheating the impression, if you will, where if I can tell that that's an AI bot that is making that quote, now Collin, no matter what you do in the future, I don't trust you because I don't even know if it's you or not. I don't know if that email is you. I don't know if that text is you. I don't know if that voicemail is you, quite frankly, because now AI is doing some pretty good stuff when it comes to voice translation and stuff like that. So with the advent of AI coming at us hard, right? And just, I think effectively going to ruin a lot of forms of communication. Where does that leave the sales professional in the future? So let's talk about the transition phase that I think we're in right now, because I do think that the SDR role, the BDR role is in a massive transition phase right now. So how do you see AI impacting the role, and therefore what do reps need to be doing now to be prepared to kind of evolve with this?
Yeah, it's a good point, because people are so used to seeing stuff that looks like it's written by a robot now that something that we do, like just say in our cold emails, is we intentionally do things to stand out, to show that it's written by a human, right? So an example would be, let's say we're reaching out because maybe there's a recent funding round or some sort of trigger-based data point that we have. Most everybody's going to use it and be very specific with the data that they can pull off the Crunchbase API, where we'll write it more casually and more generally rather than more specifically to show that we actually wrote it and it isn't just some merge field data point, right? So that's an example. So you're going to have to start to do more of those types of things to show out and say, hey, this was actually written by a human and not by AI to stand out. So that's one thing. But I think that, the thing that AI is not good at is building human experience context, right? It's not good enough there, right? So like, let's just say, for example, now it could say, hey, maybe you and I went to the same university, right? That can be built through AI, and messaging could be written around that, right? But AI can't talk about the, pizza shop that everybody knows at the corner of the university that everybody went after parties to and has the best slice, right? Like they can't do those sort of things, right? So you've got to figure out how to build those human connection experiences into your messaging to stand out and show that, hey, this was not just sent to you by a robot.
It's almost like video too, right? Like I tell reps, our superpower right now is the fact that we're not perfect. Like AI is perfect, right? Because I can cut a video now and mail merge a video, mass blast, like email. And all I can read the whole, like 90% of whatever the message is. And then all I have to do is say, hi, Collin, hi, Jim, hi, Sarah, hi, and then it merges the two together. And so when you get your email from me, it says, hi, Collin, but then it's this perfectly scripted video. I tell reps, actually do one cut videos, right?
Yep.
So even if you screw up, literally joke about it on the video and be like, hey, Collin, I wanted to send you this video. Oh, man, I'm sorry. I'm a little nervous here. This is the first video I think I've sent in a long time. I'm just trying, like, look, this is what I'm doing. Be like a normal human being because that is what is actually a benefit now for us as humans, right?
I mean, so much so that you almost want to do that on purpose. Like, let's just say you're a master video prospector and you don't fumble or make a lot of mistakes. You may want to. So that it does come off more genuine and human and real, and they don't question, is this really John sending a personalized video to me, or is this John sending a personalized messages to a bunch of people and just inserting my name?
Exactly. And it's even with, because I don't know if you saw that, I forget, was it air.ai? Have you seen this?
I haven't, no.
If you go to air.ai, it's a Google, it's Apple. So it's an AI generated voice, but it's a full blown conversation. And this guy calls up, or he gets a cold call from this group. And he had just been looking at the iPhone 14 or whatever it was. And this thing with like a British accent called him, and the guy's like, look, I'm all set. And it pauses and it goes, look, I get it. Most people hate getting unsolicited calls, but can you give me a couple of minutes to, just ask you a quick question? Sure, fine. And then no joke, like talks about like financing options. So it's not $3,500 for those. Oh, it was for the glasses. It was for the Google glass or the iPhone glasses, whatever. And they're like $3,500. And the guy's like, yeah, I'm never going to spend that kind of money. He's like, well, and then the AI thing, well, did you realize that we have financing options where you only have to pay a certain amount a month? He's like, oh, really? I didn't know that. One thing leads to another. The guy buys the glasses on an AI. And the only thing that I would pick up is that it took a fraction of a second too long between each response to give the right response. But that response was legit. And it had jokes. It went down a certain path of a dialogue, and then it actually reversed track and said, actually, never mind, and went down a separate one. So, I mean, it had all the quote unquote mistakes in there that a lot of humans do. And I'm sitting there, geez, like, shit, man. Like how, like, again, what does that mean for us, right? Because I do think at the front end of the funnel, I think it's going to get so personalized and so relevant because of the information out there about all of us. The analogy I always use is, the reason we hate spam is because, it's irrelevant. Like I don't like any of it. It's not necessary. Yeah. But why do I like Instagram? Well, I like Instagram because I've trained that algorithm, or that algorithm's trained me, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. And so I've liked certain ads. So now every ad that I get hit by Instagram is really relevant and something I might be interested in. Yeah. I do think that there's going to be a point where almost everything in our inbox is going to be super hyper personalized to us. And do I really give a shit on whether that is coming from a real person or not? Quite frankly, I don't. Now, when I talk to somebody about some questions I have, I think I want to talk to a real person, or I at least don't want to be duped to thinking that I'm talking to a real person, because that's where it all falls apart.
Yeah.
But with that and with this transition that we're in, let's go back to that SDR, BDR role, and what do you see it, call it 2 years out, right? Where do you see this role being? Is it from an outsourced provider like you who has optimized all this stuff? Or are internal orgs going to be able to retain that talent, but just shift their focus in a little way?
So it's a good question. And I don't have a full crystal ball, but I can say more companies are outsourcing it that didn't used to. They're before expanding that team, they're looking at outsourcing as an option, because a lot of people tend to think outsourcing the BDR, SDR function, it's either like an either or. It's either in-house or outsource. And a lot of times it's not. Quite frankly, most often we run in parallel with an in-house team and we support each other in many ways, right? So things that we're doing, they're using in-house, and it's not necessarily in-house versus outsource. We both have a same common goal. So I see more companies outsourcing, and even companies that you would think like large organizations, brands that we all know that have large in-house teams will still outsource for very specific projects and segmenting into new product line, new service line, new market. There's lots of options where that does make sense. I don't think that we're going to see these huge ratios of SDR to AE like we used to. A lot of that has changed. Most AE roles now have a higher prospecting self-sourced quota than they used to. Yeah. And I think that, it's going to continue to stay that way. I don't think things are going to go back to how they were. Like, I think they're going to continue to head in this direction of kind of what we're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the full cycle sales is going to be back in vogue quite a bit. And again, I always try to take my head out of my ass when it comes to SaaS versus everybody else, right? Like once you get down that SaaS in the tech world and you realize, predictable revenue and like all these, you step one step outside of SaaS and it's sales 1985 all over again, right? And most people are still full cycle sales. Very few mass industries have adopted the SDR BDR role like the SaaS and the tech space has. So I think it's kind of what's old, what's new again. But then let's go towards that and say, okay, relationships, right? I mean, people say they buy from people they like. That's not true in my opinion. They buy from people they trust, right? So I don't have to like you, but I just have to trust that you at least have my interest in mind in some way, shape, or form, and that what you're telling me is real. So with that, how do you think relationships get developed moving forward here? Because it's not, I mean, we've gone well past the steak dinners and the golf, for the past probably 10 years. I think that's been on the decline pretty significantly. So what is the role of a sales professional with all this other stuff being taken care of? Because when I can get more value out of going into ChatGPT and putting your company in there and asking it, what are the pros and cons of this service versus that service? And here's my needs, and could you help me out? When I can get more value out of that than I can a sales rep who's going to drone through BANT questions and some dumbass PowerPoint presentation, like, why would I want to engage with a sales professional? Like, where is the value now for us in this equation?
Yeah. I mean, I think you're going to see larger deals be closed without a salesperson. Like, we've already starting to see that. I mean, we see it a lot in consumer, like people buying houses without ever seeing them, cars without ever driving them, like you name it. I mean, we're going to see more of that in the B2B side for sure. I think that, salespeople have to be more and more aware of the fact that how accessible information is, right? Like, look, I mean, there's still plenty of salespeople out there that'll tell you everything you want to hear and every bill of goods to get you to sign. Yeah. Like, we've all seen or dealt with our fair share of those, but they're easily going to be spotted, right? Where they could maybe get away with some of that stuff in the past. That's going to be a lot harder to do with the access of knowledge that's available. But I think to kind of touch on your point, like trust, right? People buy from people they trust. I agree with that. I think that there's a lot of ways that you could build trust, right? One is producing content like consistently that's relevant to the people that you serve. Like, that builds a tremendous amount of trust. Every single opportunity that I've gotten, say from LinkedIn, has been way more qualified and further down the trust funnel than any other lead that I've ever received. Doing 100%. Things like what you and I are doing right now, going on podcasts, extremely powerful way. I actually had posted about it today, about how, I've closed over $2.3 million off of podcast leads. People who either came in on my podcast, heard me on a podcast, and reached out. And because the reason podcasting is so powerful at building trust is because listeners trust the host that they listen to. And it's the equivalent, if that host brings somebody onto their show, they're kind of telling the listeners, hey, I trust this person. And it's the equivalent of a referral, right? Yeah. And the problem where a lot of people go wrong with leveraging podcasting is they go with that agenda of like, hey, I'm going to go here, I'm going to pitch, I'm going to sell, I'm here to take from this platform, right? Yep. And if you approach it differently of like, how can I give, how can I contribute, how can I add value, it works extremely well.
Yeah, it's funny. Anytime there's only been a few, because I do a decent amount of prep, and I do my prep, and I also set very clear expectations to the person coming on the podcast. But as soon as you get into pitch mode, I'm like, okay, look, you'll have your chance at the end here. Let's stay on track. And I have a 2 strike and you're out rule. Like you pitch once, fine, whatever, I get it. You might be in that mode, right? You pitch the second time, this interview's over. Like, we're done, and I'm not posting this in any way, shape, or form, right? Yeah. Because again, the whole long tail of it. And that's what I think, what you're hitting on is personal brand here, and why I'm still beating this drum, because, the problem, I think, the reason that most people don't follow through on their personal brand is because there is no short-term benefit to it. Like, there's nothing that you're going to like come on a podcast, whatever. I mean, maybe, just maybe, or post something or whatever, and somebody will say, oh, let's do business together. It is such a long-term play when it comes to brand. But I'll tell you right now, man, my brand has literally saved my entire career in business this year, because when the SaaS industry fell apart, right, in Q1, 95% of my clients were in the SaaS world. And so contracts stopped, both sponsorships and training stuff. And I had my team and all this other stuff going, but I had to get back to work, and I shook every bush and LinkedIn and all these different things, and was able to generate quite a few meetings. I think I got like 70 meetings in Q1 and a lot of them were because of the brand, because people remembered me, knew who I was, whatever. And without that, like, most of my clients right now are 1 degree of separation, right? Maybe 2, where somebody's, either done my training in the past and they want to do it again, or they know somebody who did, or they've been following me for such a long time that they're like, all right, John, now we trust you, so I want to go do business with you right now, because everybody else is basically full of shit. And without that personal brand that took me 15, 20 years to build, there's no way I'd be able to stay afloat right now. So how are you encouraging that balance, or how do you kind of coach on that balance of short-term results, right? We got to get them, right? I mean, for whatever company you're working at, you got to get short-term results, but also the long-term play of your career here, and making sure that you're at least spending some time building that personal brand. How do you balance that with your organization?
I think the thing that's important to keep in mind here, and something I talk about, is like priorities, right? Because it's easy for people to want to be famous on LinkedIn and chase likes and comments, but not be good at their job, right? Yeah. There's a lot of people that are full of shit on LinkedIn that, frankly, couldn't execute 90% of the stuff they talk about.
Nope. I know that for a fact, by the way.
And so I think it's for people in a sales role specifically, right? Yep. Don't share stuff that you don't have direct experience with, number one, right? Yep. And I think the main thing is being consistent and having a process, right? So are you droning and scrolling through feeds and commenting, and like that's what you're spending your workday on? Or do you have a very specific where, hey, you're running your sales calls, you're doing your prospecting, and then you have a chunk of time carved out for LinkedIn, whether that's content, writing content, scheduling content. So I think a lot of it comes down to being with efficient and process, right? So if you, let's just say you want to get on a post every day type of schedule, well, have a block on Friday where you write all your content and you schedule it out, and it's done. You don't got to think about it. And then maybe you have a little bit of time in the morning, a little bit of time at lunch or before or after lunch where you engage, comment, do things like that. So you have to be intentional to be consistent. And what happens is if you're not, and you're not like actually scheduling on your calendar, then you get lost in this sort of vicious cycle of spending way more time on the platform doing nothing productive. So I think those are the kind of key ingredients to using it, being consistent, showing up. And also, I think an important thing is having proper expectations, right? Like know that you very well may not get zero business from this for the next 6 to 12 months. But the thing that you can't really attribute credit to is how many people buy from you because you're posting valuable content. And they may never comment on anything. They may never like anything, and you may never know, but you'll be surprised how many people are consuming your content that you have no idea, and it impacts them somehow, some way in the sales cycle.
Absolutely. Or impacts them to then tell somebody else to go look, right? I mean, I think that's why, HubSpot and Inbound, right? Like they have their Inbound conference, and I'm pretty sure I don't know if I'd bet on it because it wasn't too big of a, but I'm hearing the rumbles that they might change it to all bound. So instead of inbound, it's all bound, because that's ultimately what it's about right now. It's because all these impressions that we're leaving, right? The attribution leads to sales and marketing divide and all this other, was it an MQL, an SQL? Where did it come from? Who originated it? Ultimately, who gives a shit, right? We got the meeting with a qualified buyer. Like, we should all be celebrating here. But everybody right now is fighting. And I think we need to take that veil off and just say, hey, look, I don't give a shit how this meeting comes to us. Like, that meeting because, for instance, like when Morgan worked for me, he would do a ton of cold calling and outbound, right, into these target accounts. And then we'd get an inbound. And I usually got all the inbounds back then. And I would be able to look at it and say, oh, cool. Well, this wasn't the person that Morgan was directly going after. But I would look in this Salesforce and I'd be like, holy shit, like, he was going after this company quite a bit. And you cannot tell me that all that work that he was doing to get into that account didn't prompt somebody else to go tell somebody else to then come to us, and they came to us their way as opposed to us forcing them through our process. And so this all-bound approach, I think this is what moves towards that again, outbounds being a part of almost like a marketing function from a touch standpoint and an impression standpoint that leads to full cycle sales again. Because again, who gives a shit where it came from? We got it.
Yeah.
So whether it's inbound, outbound, or any of that stuff, right?
Yeah. I've seen it firsthand. I mean, we had an example where we outbounded to one person and they basically told us to F off. And then 3 days later, we got an inbound from somebody else on their team.
Right. Well, I think that's what people don't understand is that that people want to communicate the way they want to communicate and when they want to communicate, right? Being forced into responding to something immediately or getting on it, even like cold calling, as valuable as I think that is like, now I'm on the spot, right? So that's why my defenses are almost automatically up, because I don't know who the hell you are. I'm not going to give you a ton of info, right? So don't try to sell me on shit right there. Educate me, ask me a few questions, whatever, but let me then go do some homework and come back to you. Right, which is why I still don't mind when people are like, hey, just send me information. As much as people like, screw you, like that's a blow off, I actually think that's a good thing. I qualify it a little bit before I do, obviously, and I want to see, try to schedule a follow-up call on the calendar, that type of thing. But you want information before you talk to me? Yes, I will send you information before you talk to me, because I wouldn't want to talk to anybody without a little bit of insights into what the hell I'm about to talk about.
Oh, yeah, and so many people try to just bulldoze through that or take it as an objection. And it's like, you know, and you do gotta, hey, are they trying to brush me off? And you can frankly just ask, hey, John, look, John, I've been doing this a long time. I can handle it. Like, you know, is there something you genuinely would love to see if I were to send you some information? Or are you just being a nice guy and trying to get rid of me? And, you know, they'll tell you, if you just laugh, you know, they'll say, hey, look, I have no interest. I'm just trying to get you off the phone. And it's like, cool. That's a win. I don't have to call you back.
Yeah. Exactly. We both win. I mean, I used to say almost exactly the same thing. I'd be like, look, Collin, there's really two reasons people ask me to send them information. One is they're genuinely interested and they're going to schedule a follow-up call and we're going to take that next step. The other is they're just trying to get off the phone and be nice. Which one are you? Right. And, you know, half the time I get, I'm like, wait, because I don't want to waste your time. I sure as shit don't want to waste mine. Thank you very much. If you ever need our website's this, have a great day, right? I mean, and just leave them with a smile.
The thing that people forget is we're dealing with people, right? And people are highly dynamic, right? That person that's going to say, send me information because they want to get you off the phone is the same person that if they saw you in public and your fly's down, they're not going to tell you.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. So let's end on this one. What are the different skills? So I think, you know, historically, especially coming into the SDR, BDR, but let's talk sales in general. with the advent of AI, right, there's a big argument right now to be made for just rip and replace. Like, you know what, what got us here will not get us there. So I'm going to dump my entire team, throw away basically my old tech stack, and start AI native with sales reps who are to a certain degree AI native and can leverage this stuff. So there is an argument to be made for that. So what now does a sales rep, the skills a sales rep should be trying to improve on their own to stay relevant as we move forward here?
Yeah, I mean, I think over the course of time, you're going to have to see more and more of the AI-powered sales rep, right? And there's going to be sales training, certifications, you name it, around how to leverage these tools to be better in a sales role. And, you know, it's kind of the same argument of like, hey, let's say if you're applying for a sales job and you see this person's got X amount of followers on LinkedIn and, you know, posts content and has a network, and this person doesn't. And from a skill and experience standpoint, they're the same. Who are you going to hire? Well, if you see that this rep has experience leveraging AI, using that tool stack, you know, to generate business, to, you know, help them, assist them in the sales cycle, and this one doesn't, which one are you going to hire? And I think we're going to start to see more and more of that, of people that have those skill sets are going to be chosen over those that don't.
Yeah, I'll tell you a real world example. So my daughter's 13 years old, going into high school, right? Well, we're looking at high schools right now. We're looking at private high schools here in Massachusetts. And the competition's pretty fierce, right? I mean, Massachusetts, we have a massive amount of like really, really good public private high schools. And one of the questions I'm asking to differentiate them is, what's your stance on AI, and how do you integrate AI into the education process? And there's been a couple of schools, no joke, that looked great. You know, we did the campus tour, we did the whole thing, they got all the academics, but their answer was, well, you know, we're not sure yet, and we're not letting, you know, reps or students use it because we're unsure of its implications. And I'm like, with that answer, they got crossed off my list. Even if my daughter liked them, quite frankly, if my daughter liked the school and they have a kind of, you know, we don't know what's happening with it, so we really don't want people to use it yet, or they don't really have a kind of a philosophy around it about how they're going to leverage it, I tell my daughter, I'm like, no, I'm not paying for you to go to a school that's not going to teach you how to use the tools that inevitably are going to impact your life and definitely your career. So just as important, the same thing with employees. Like, if you're not going to be able to answer that question of, so how do you use AI in your day-to-day to make you more efficient? If you can't give me a clear, articulate way that you use that moving forward, I don't think you're getting hired.
No. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think so much so it's like, you know, in the interview, like, you know, breaking that down, giving specific examples, right? Just how you would, of how you know, landed a certain logo, you know, it's going to be, how did you leverage AI? You know, how are you using it on a daily basis? And the people that are kind of squiggling and, well, you know, they're going to get passed over.
Yeah, immediately. And I you know, there's a lot of other stuff. I mean, there's the traditional, and I think these things never go away, right? Grit and, you know, coachability and attitude, like, you know, business acumen, those type of things. But more and more now, like, if I was hiring, that would be one of my top 3 questions, which is, what's your approach to using AI? Give me some specific examples of how you've used it to make yourself more efficient. Because if not, the days of just grinding it out and working harder, those are still there. You have to work your ass off. But if you are not leveraging this stuff, man, it's going to be, you will wake up one day and you will be absolutely replaced, because the stuff will be able to do it better than you can.
Yeah, because the whole point is you can be a lot leaner if you have a team that's proficient in using AI.
Awesome, man. Well, look, we're coming up on time here, so let's tell the audience a little bit more about where they can find more about you and what you're doing from an org standpoint, both from a client and if you're hiring, all that stuff. Tell people where they can find out more info.
Yeah, thanks. Look, best place is to just check out our podcast, Sales Transformation. So from there, you can find out things about me, Leadium, we're hiring, all that stuff. Check out Sales Transformation after you write a review for this show here. Takes a lot to put on a good show and be consistent with it. So, John, thanks for having me. Make sure you share this show with your friends. And then if you love podcasts, you can check out Sales Transformation.
Love it, man. How many episodes you guys going on right now?
I think we're approaching 700.
700. Holy shit, man. I've been doing one a week for, you know, I think we're up on like 250 or 260 at this point. So like that, so do you guys do more than one a week?
Yeah, we're like almost daily.
Oh, wow. No shit. Daily.
Yeah.
Ooh, nice. Yeah. All right. Well, I don't have that kind of energy, man. So good for you. But I'll definitely take a look at it and push people your way. So I appreciate you coming on here, Collin. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the conversation and you level up a little bit here, realizing that this stuff's coming for you, whether you like it or not. And like I always say at the end of all these podcasts, go out there and make somebody smile today, because no matter how bad your day is going or you think it went, you make somebody smile today and you know you had a good day, and the world needs a lot more of that right now. So thank you all very much, and I will see you on the other side. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. With your support and our incredible guests, we're one of the top sales podcasts out there right now, and I can't thank you enough. Now, to keep the momentum going, it would mean the world to me if you could go and leave a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform and share some of your favorite episodes with your network. Also, check out my new website, jbarrows.com, where you'll find even more ways to engage. There's a ton of free content, and you can also get trained from me directly as an individual or for your team. Look, I'm out there selling every day just like you are, and I'm doing my best to stay on top of all the latest trends in sales and technology. So if you're looking to level up and you give a shit about this profession of sales, let's connect and make it happen together.